Hello, my friends, and welcome. This is Father Marcus from the Costa Blanca Anglican Chaplaincy, and delighted that we can spend just a little bit of time together this beautiful and sunny day here in the Costa Blanca. At our morning prayer this evening, if you were to read that, you would have been reading from Paul's second letter to the Corinthians in chapter 12, where he's had this experience, this religious experience again for him. And he starts telling people about it, and then he starts saying how special he is, that he's had these visions and these experiences and these encounters, and a little bit he goes on about like how he's as great as the other apostles, if not even better, because of everything that's going on. But he doesn't want to boast about it. He doesn't want to draw attention to it, because that's not what he's like. He doesn't want to do that, but he's doing it by actually saying that. And he says, if I were to boast it, it would be okay because it would be true, but I'm not going to boast about it. If I was going to boast about anything, I'm going to boast about Jesus Christ and everything that he did, but I'm not. It's one of those strange things that he tells you how great he is, and then humbly says, but actually it's not about me, it's about Jesus. But you need to know that I'm special. And he is special. So anyway, he goes through this whole process. But then he says, but the thing is, that God has given me this thorn in my flesh, just to stop me from getting too elated, to stop me thinking too much of myself. I've got this issue, and it's there so that I don't, focus on myself. I'm frail and human like everybody else is. And then he goes on, he says, 3 times I've asked God to take it away from me, and he hasn't. And I've got it, again, he says, so as not to feel too elated and too full of myself. And he then, so this is typical Paul, he comes out of all this stuff, it's all a little bit about him, but then he comes out with this beautiful piece of Christian teaching, this theology that is great. He says, after all, he says, when I've asked God to take it away, he hasn't done it. And this is why. He says, my grace is sufficient for you, and my power is made perfect in weakness. And that is such great stuff, such great teaching. And thank the Lord for Paul, and bless Paul for being able to convey these truths about God, even though he's a little bit full of himself sometimes. My grace is sufficient for you, and power is made perfect in weakness. And then a couple of sentences later, whenever I am weak, then I am strong. This is at the heart of his theology. And what tends to happen is Jesus comes out with statements, and Paul tends to try and add a little bit of theology to them. Jesus, in the Beatitudes, sums all of this up very, very simply. He says, how blessed are the meek. That's what that means, is blessed are those who know their need of God. And Jesus is saying exactly the same thing. Paul sort of expands it a little bit, but it's there. And this whole idea that we gain our strength through our weakness and God's grace is sufficient is so beautiful, and it's at the heart of what we think about our relationship with God. For me, reading this passage this morning just reminded me of a number of things. And the first is reading the response of God when Paul asks him to take away this thorn in his flesh. It's like God saying, don't you get too big for your boots. Don't think you're so special, because you're just the same as everybody else. And that is a good one for us all to learn. Don't get too big for your boots. A little bit of humility goes a long way. And the second thing that made me think of, and again, I think this is just good to be reminded of, is don't take yourself too seriously. Sometimes we do. Sometimes we think we're all a little bit special, particularly those of us who wear our collars back to front and stand at the front. We ought really not to take ourselves too seriously. We learn so much more from others than we ever give to them and share with them. So don't take yourself too seriously. And this teaching that power is made perfect through weakness. When we're too strong, we rely too much on ourselves. And it's not until we acknowledge our frailty and our weakness that we can engage with real power. Because when we're doing so great and feeling real strong, we're not relying on anybody else. But it's not until we recognise our frailty and our humanity and the things that we can't do that we can ask for help. And we can ask for help from one another, and that is a great thing to do. You know, I'm so blessed to have such great colleagues in the clergy over here, and they know how constantly I ask their wisdom and their advice on things. They're much brighter than I am about everything. And, you know, we're strong because we work together, and we're strong because we're okay to ask for help. But even more important than that is this idea that when we know that we're frail and we know that we're, you know, falling apart sometimes, that's when we start asking God. That's when we start asking for God to help. And that is when we gain our real strength, when we start to rely on him, when we start to know our need of him, when we start to know that actually his will is the best will to follow and not ours. And his wisdom is the one that sees through all the nonsense that we bring with us whenever we try and formulate an answer to a problem. Now, when we rely on God, when we rely on the teaching of Jesus, when we ask him for help, when we trust in him, that's when things begin to go right. And that's when we discover the depth of strength that is a consequence of our faith. So Paul, a little bit full of himself to start with, but teaches us this real truth, this great beauty. Jesus says it so simply, so beautifully. Blessed are the meek. Blessed are those who know their need of God. And you know that you need him, and I know that I need him. And because of that, we are blessed. So bless you, bless you, bless you. And I'll speak to you soon. Bye now.